of the 5-session seminar supported by National Cultural Fund of Hungary. And Chris is going to lead the session. I'll be chairing. My name is Cao Xi. I'm connecting you all from Beijing. It's been a quite exciting journey for all of us, for the organizing group, the 5 of us, to be able to do this. And I think beginning from the first session, we've had quite a lot of interesting discussion gathered by everyone, and it's really interesting to hear a lot of your comments and ideas about what we offer and what we're interested in. So this session, for those who are new to this, these sessions are about what we're interested in, connecting what we think is pressing for children and young people, what we think is the useful form of drama now. And so far we have 4 sessions. We began with each of us come up with a structure, followed by a frame that David suggested, and we each came up with one idea, a very simple idea for starting a drama. And then as a group, we decided to focus on one, and that's the drama that most of you will be familiar with, the exchange between the teacher and the students between the phone. And then we contextualized, me and Kostas was working on the storyfying it, contextualizing it into different culture, different story, looking at the context for that little exchange. And Adam was suggesting all of us to work on the object, and he came in with a basic structure to follow up, for us to follow up, leading towards that, to working on that object, which is the phone. And today, Chris is going to share, he's actually written a little piece of text to go with the sort of theme for today, which is on extreme. And so the structure of today's discussion will be, Chris is going to open up a discussion by sharing some of what he thinks will be the important aspect of understanding what is extreme. How do we understand extreme and tragic in drama? And then he's going to share that text that he's written, and me and Suron and Chris is going to read, and he's going to put it up so you can all see it. And then the organizing group is going to have a discussion around 3 areas, which will be, as I said, the use of extreme in the situation. And second will be how this situation can be developed further into tragedy. And also, we would like the organizing group to comment on the phone, the objects in the exchange, the phone and the pen. And we're going to bring some of our previous discussion into this as well, in terms of how do we differentiate working from a text to a sort of improvising, sort of being in role for the students. Then we'll open up for the general discussion, and we'll welcome everyone to chip in. And then Chris is going to wrap up with some of the theoretical underpinning. And then that basically finish us with our entire 5 sessions. This won't be the end of our discussion. We found something quite interesting, and we're finding ways to keep having discussion like this in the future. Without further ado, Chris.
Okay, yeah. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Yeah, good. Right. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to just open this session by saying a few words about the tragic and the extreme. And obviously, I'll speak more later, in detail, more later. But I wanted to just share a couple of quotes from Edward Bond, which I think are very useful for framing what we're going to be doing this evening. To be honest with you, I can't remember where I got this from. I think it was an email a long time ago. Some of you may know it, so you could probably locate that for us. But he said, drama's situations are unjust. The injustice may be overt, concealed by ideology. Drama forces the situation to the extreme to reveal the irrationality and suffering that in daily realism may pass unnoticed or even be accepted. It makes the acceptable unacceptable because the situation is unjust. It is tragic. And later on in the same communication, he talks about how a tragic figure must always make the situation worse. And he refers to Antigone, Hecuba, Lear, and how they must go deeper into their situation to uncover the last scraps of private or corporate depravity and to recover the last shreds of innocence and justice. Then they choose and speak, and he says, and an age defines itself. So I'm very interested in this characterization of the relationship between justice and injustice, and how that in itself makes drama tragic, and how the extremities of situations that we can create in drama enable us to reveal or lift an ideological veil that enables us to see the irrationality and suffering that can pass for normality in everyday life. And as he says, the relationship between the tragic and the extreme, and how any tragic figure that we create can help us see how the unacceptable becomes normalized, and how any tragic figure needs to make the situation worse before it can get better and recover the last shreds of innocence and justice. And of course, as has been mentioned by Cao Xi already, I want us to just think about the relationship between the mundane and the tragic, how a situation can be turned into the tragic, and perhaps even we might want to consider the choice of material and the development of episodes of a narrative towards a tragedy. Where does a tragedy begin? Is it encoded in the very beginning? Can anything be turned into tragedy? So to do this, having had very first-hand experience last time of actually trying to improvise on Zoom and failing miserably, I thought I'd try something else. And what I wanted to do was to continue to try and open up this situation a bit further and stay with the situation we've been working with, to explore the relationship between extremity and the tragic and the potential that lies in this situation for tragedy. I got the idea from it, actually. I think it was something that maybe Bobby or Kate said last time. So, but I can't remember which one it was, just as I can't remember where I got that quote from either. But it gave me the inspiration to just try and situate the problem in a very concrete way. So just to give some pretext before we read it, it won't take long, by the way, and I'm going to attempt screen sharing, so that should be quite exciting for me. But to give some pretext, I'm assuming that because of this school policy, the teacher has confiscated the phone. So the phone has been taken away from the student. We all are familiar, those of us who've participated so far, that although from the school's point of view, her using the phone is intolerable in school, from her point of view, it's a critical point of connection, not only with her world, but the fact that she comes from a very economically challenged environment where she is both a student and a primary carer for her grandmother, who has had a history of falling at home, and often she's required to return home at very short notice and assist her grandmother. So in terms of what she's got at stake in the phone, and in terms of what authority has got at stake in the phone, is an extreme or potentially extreme contradiction, paradox. And of course, the teacher who wants to be liked by the children in the school, the students, is caught somewhere in the middle, trying to mediate the needs both of the system, the social order, and of course her head teacher, the principal, and the needs of the students. The other thing I'd just like to share with you is that I've also taken the decision here to say that this student is also not only a primary carer and attempting to fulfill all the requirements of national examinations so that she can have some kind of future, she's also dependent, or she has dependence on her economically. And so after school, at the end of most, if not every day, she has a session in a local convenience corner store, working behind the counter. So she has a full evening shift at the end of every school day. And on this situation, she knows that she's going to have to get out of school as soon as possible and get into the shop so that she can do her shift. So as school was drawing to a close, she went to the toilets and began to put her face makeup on to prepare herself from the bag that we've described before that she used to keep the phone in. She also keeps her makeup. She's made up her face, made up her lips, and she has gone from the toilets to the teacher's classroom, which is what she's been instructed to do. So we're going to join the drama, or the text, if you like, at the point at which she is going to the classroom where the teacher is waiting for her. Have I made that clear? Is that pretty clear? Thank you very much. Okay, so now Surong, where are you? I can't see you. Oh yeah, are you okay? Can you hear me all right? Yeah, so Surong is going to read the student, Cao Xi is going to read the teacher, and I'll read the stage directions, okay? And I'll also try and share it so you can follow it on screen. Okay, so are you two ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, you okay, Surong?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, so I shall now try and share screen. Is this it? Yes. Can you see that, people? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good, 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 good.
Yes,
All right. Okay, thank you. All right. So it's called the classroom, imaginatively. The classroom, end of the school day. The door into the corridor is open. The teacher is sat at a desk marking some books. The student's mobile phone is on the desk. The student comes to the door. She's wearing eye makeup and lipstick. She stops. Teacher continues marking. Pause. Student knocks. Teacher continues to complete the marking he is doing. Student knocks again. Teacher gestures to wait a moment. Student dabs the lipstick on the corner of her mouth with the index finger of her right hand. Teacher continues to mark. Finishes page. Closing the book. Looks up.
Come in.
Student enters the classroom. Teacher pulls out a sheet of paper and rests it face down. Moment. Sits back in his chair. Knocks a pen onto the floor as he does so. Teacher does not move. Student stands in front of the desk. She looks at the mobile phone on the desk. He looks at her.
You know that wearing makeup in school is...
Not your school time, after school.
Pause.
Sit down.
Student folds her arms.
Sit down. Please.
Student sits.
Let me start by saying that
I want my phone.
I don't make the rules. And
I want my phone.
look,
Student leans forward in a seat a little. Teacher reaches for her mobile phone and pulls it closer to him. Student sucks her teeth and sits back, folds arms.
I want us to get along, okay?
Okay. Can I have my phone?
Look, I know this seems a bit, but I can't give it to you until
Please. I
B.
need my phone.
you agree, sign this contract.
What?
This contract saying you won't bring your phone into school.
No.
Yes, that's school policy.
No way. You can't do that.
Sorry, I can.
Beat. Teacher stands, picks up the student's mobile phone, steps on the pen. It breaks. He goes to the door, shuts it.
Sorry, it's not me. It's the rules.
Rules of shit.
Well, that might well be, but that sort of language is not acceptable, by the way. But that's the procedure.
Student stands. A mobile phone rings. Teacher glances down at a pocket. Student tuts. Teacher looks at her. Student stares at teacher. Teacher glances down. Phone continues to ring. The student continues to stare at the teacher. Teacher points.
Sit down.
The phone stops ringing. Beat. Teacher glances over his shoulder, then watches the student wander over to the chair and sit sideways to the desk, still looking at the teacher.
Good.
Pause. Teacher moves towards the desk. His mobile phone begins to ring again.
Might be important.
Teacher fumbles in a pocket and attempts to silence his phone without looking. He inadvertently answers it. We hear a muffled voice. Teacher finally succeeds in ending the call. Teacher goes back to the desk, sits. Student continues to sit sideways on. Teacher puts student's mobile back on the desk. Silence.
Look, just sign it and we can both get on with our lives.
No response. He slides the paper across the desk. Looks at the broken pen on the floor. Rummaging in a pocket. Teacher opens a desk drawer. The teacher's mobile phone begins to ring once more. Stops looking in the drawer. Student's phone begins to ring. Pause. Teacher looks at student's mobile. The student spins in the chair and grabs for her phone. The teacher gripping her by the wrist. Student grabs teacher's forearm with her other hand. Teacher responds by grabbing the elbow of the student's other arm with his other hand. They struggle, inertia. The teacher phone stop. The student tugs. Teacher resists. Inertia. Student trying to pull away with the phone. Teacher holding onto her wrist. Forearm and elbow locked. The student's phone stops ringing. They relax a little. Beat. Student pulls hard with a sudden movement. Teacher loses his footing slightly from stepping on the broken pen and falls further across the desk towards the student. They stare at each other. Beat. Student kisses him hard on the lips. Teacher pulls back, falls onto the floor, onto his back, legs splayed, bumps his head. Teacher is stunned. Student stands. Student has a phone in her hand. Beat. Her lipstick is smudged across her face from the pressure. Student photos him on the floor. Takes a selfie. Teacher starts to get to him, screaming.
He kissed me. He fucking kissed me.
Okay. Thank you, you two. So, as Soshi was saying, what I'm interested in from Adam and David and Kostas and Soshi, of course, is the use of the extreme in that situation and how you see it may be developed further towards tragedy. And also any comments we've got relating to the phone and the pen in particular, the use of the objects in the situation, because this, of course, is a developing motif of all of the sessions that we've had so far. So if I open it up to you for your responses, I think we could begin a discussion for some time, and you can keep a track of that, Soshi, and then we can move on and perhaps look at some other areas, that latter area that you outlined about the relationship between text, metaxis, being in role, and improvisation.
I'm just dragging people in just
Okay.
to have more focus.
Okay.
So
yeah,
Adam.
So I'll start. For me, it was really interesting how Chris, you worked on developing the situation from the sort of mundane towards the extreme, and this was one element which I really enjoyed in it. Also, in the sense of how it developed through sort of steps, in quite recognizable steps that are all quite logical in their own way. So there, I can really understand why both the roles, both the characters, the teacher and the student, are doing what they're doing, and this development proceeds step by step, and and I think the use of the phone, of how the outside world and the pressures come in. And the institution through the signed paper. So it's really well layered, and of course, the sort of the twist in how this situation turns with the kiss becomes quite extreme and quite contrasted, and I think that I really think that works really interestingly, really well. The other part which I could sense, I don't know, I mean, it would be different if we were in the same space and we could hear each other's reactions, was the relation of the comic and the tragic going side by side. So I don't know, I find myself giggling at some points, and I don't know whether it was cringing to some extent, just the way the teacher closes the door, and that's the sense of, oh, no, don't do that, but there's also something quite funny in it, but also this duality is really useful, I think, But that's the question: how far does it go? How far can you push it? So, and I found that quite interesting, quite extreme, the way it happens. But that's also probably because I'm myself invested as a teacher in most of similar situations, having to deal with the students. So you know, that's really interesting how she comes out in a way as a winner of this situation, but by really tricking or twisting the situation around, using the very few resources she has there. So that's just my first comment, just to get our discussion going.
Thank you. I don't know if anyone wants to come in on that. Or any of you.
Well, I just think the first time that I read this, I just didn't understand it. I just thought, why did she do that? And I suppose that's where that's what that bit of a, if you will, that's what the extreme takes you. It is that you were sort of, I was a bit like that teacher sitting on the floor, being basically stunned, trying to understand what's happened. And I suppose that's what we're looking for, in a way. Even, I mean, we're going to bring Adam into this discussion about the difference between this and being in row and metaxis and all that. But just working on, I can imagine, you know, being an actor working on that scene, knowing, I suppose it's a question for you all, knowing that she's going to do it would change much of the teacher's being, do you think? Because that's a very, very extreme act, and I suppose if you know that that's going to happen, then would it be different to, like, in an actual situation where you completely, I think it was completely out of his, he didn't understand anything, then. And I suppose that's, for me, that's the extreme. That's where you're in that area, you're in that zone where you just don't know what happened.
Do you mean if you knew, you mean if you were working on it in some kind of improvisation?
Yeah.
So that the fact of actually knowing that that's going to happen.
So it's the same with Adam, you know, all the time you see tension, you feel being, you know, if you hear that tension, you know something's going to happen. But I think in terms of metaxis, then you know exactly you're going to be kissed, and she's going to kiss you, or you're going to kiss him. Then what is that anticipated action change to the situation, or does it change at all?
Okay.
Hi. I think it's a very interesting point, but I think it's also very well structured in the sense that it is very underlined and pronouns that at the very beginning she does her makeup. So I don't entirely agree that she is out of resources, because I think there's a small chance that she was planning this all along. With the makeup on, because at the very beginning of the scene, she if you decide as a director to make it very, very almost as a ritual or something, or arming herself, because she knows she is very desperate and she needs to go to desperate measures, and then a lipstick turns into a weapon in this case, and by that, at the very end, it was a very interesting moment, because it was unexpected, but at the very same time it connected back to the beginning of the scene, which I think was it was a very interesting contrast in that sense. And in this sense, I'm not sure how the anticipation. So I think the makeup at the very beginning just kind of rules out the thing that it would be entirely by surprise, and also knowing that, but not knowing what is going to happen, but having that scene at the very beginning, both, it just it really gave it a very so without that makeup. So if she just came in with her lipstick on, it would have been less powerful, I guess my point is. But this is just what I wanted to add.
David, do you want to comment on the scene? Are you okay with your computer?
Did you ask me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, my sound is not very good at it now. Just to help me understand, is this a script for? It's going to be a TIE program, is it? Is that what it's for?
No, it's not. It's just a situation that I was trying to, as I said at the beginning, I found it very difficult to improvise last time, as someone who tried, and that's because we're not in the same space. So everything I tried to do with Cao Xi was just impossible because we couldn't read each other's eyes. So I thought I'd try and structure it in a dramatic sense. So no, it's got nothing to do with a TIE program for me. It's about what a situation, based on what we know so far from everything that we've done, how we might push the situation a bit further, which is what we were trying to do with improvisation, but we couldn't do, or I didn't think we could do it very successfully last time. And I just tried to build some dramatic devices and structures into a text because it's easy for us all to see it and read it. But that's the only, I haven't done anything about a TIE program or anything.
So who's going to improvise it? I mean, what's its purpose? Is it for a classroom use or? Well,
it could be, but that's not what I offered it as. I'm interested in it because of what I said as the 3 questions are. How the extreme is working in this situation, and how the situation might be developed further towards a tragic context, and how we might choose to open that up further. We could use it, and it could be improvised. That's the interest that Adam's brought forward to it, but that's not particularly what I had in mind. No.
Okay. And I'm just trying to context what I'm just trying to get my head around what's the purpose, what I'm trying to do here. So if we're just looking at a piece of text,
yeah,
and how to in a piece of text for any purpose in any situation, how to structure for the extreme.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then obviously, if we, it's very legitimate for you to ask the question about how you might try and develop something like that to improvise, that you could get young people, but how would you do that? Which is the question really that Adam is raising as well, I think, as part of it. But yeah.
Yeah, okay. Perhaps I can just stick with trying to get the extreme and without trying to pin it down to who it's for. Well, I think there is an extreme there. I think somewhere else you said that she's just put the makeup on because she's going to work. She wasn't intending to. So we need to know the pretext. If she wasn't intending any of this, if she just got her makeup on ready because she's got to go straight off to work.
That's what that's the pretext I was offering. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So she's so this is for her as unexpected as it is for him. Yeah. It's happened somehow.
Chris, you're on mute.
Pardon?
Chris, you mute yourself, I think.
Have I? Sorry.
Yeah.
Have I muted myself? Sorry, can you hear me? Sorry, I muted myself. Sorry, go on, David. Sorry.
No, it still seems to me like it's unexpected, not something she planned. So that's quite interesting because she's in this situation. She seems to have been driven to it by she doesn't know what or why. She's just done it.
Yeah.
And then she's okay, so she's immersed in what's going on in the world today, which is putting everything on social media and making a huge furore and bringing down reputations. And we've had all this in the press recently. You know, there's an interesting comment in one of the papers that the media gave. You may not know this, but there's been a question of an important figure, a newsreader, asking for explicit photos. So there were the media had 10,000 reports of it, and the key climate years of research. It got 5 mentions in the media. So in a sense, she's in that world of, yeah, okay, right, he's being a bastard. I'll get him back. So it feels like she's, to me, it reads as though nothing's been planned, and she's found herself. She's in it because she's got all this inside her about the media. That's the world she's living in. That's what you do. He can't get. I think her phone rang, didn't it? Her phone rang, so she doesn't know what's on that phone.
Yeah. First of all, his phone rings first.
Yeah, I got that.
And then she's.
I think her phone rings as well.
And then then it stops, and then it rings again, and he accidentally, you know, when you put your hand in your pocket and you shuffle that.
Yeah, sure.
It on, and then eventually he turns it off, and then hers starts to ring and his rings simultaneously, so they're both ringing. Yeah,
okay. Well, she knows that her gran may be on the floor. She's in a desperate situation there.
Yeah.
So the whole situation, she's suddenly over the top. She's leaning over. So they're gripped with each other, and it happens.
Yeah.
To me, that is the extreme. That is now a mess. She's got herself into an incredible mess. But so she's got to get him into a mess. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that seems to work. Yeah. That seems to work for me, and that does seem a tragic. That's what things have descended to in pupil-teacher relationships because of systems just wanting results, treating students like ciphers, losing the human, just wanting. And on the other hand, this teacher, I think the way Cao Xi read it was very interesting, I thought, because it was more sort of trying to be accommodating while being a bastard at the same time. So you know, I think that was interesting, because he's clearly on the side of the system, and whatever happens, he's gonna push her to submit or conform, when she won't. So that there's a real positive rebellion against the system from her, but she doesn't know the form to put it into, except create disaster for her and then turn it into disaster for him. So that, yeah, I don't know if that feeds into what you're looking for. The objects and the phone is crucial. I think because that depends on the purpose. I mean, for it to fall and tread on it and break in a position and a situation where he could slip on it would need very careful rehearsing. I think it couldn't happen spontaneously. So
yeah,
unless you're imagining it happening, in which case it's. So I think I wasn't quite sure how they were working. I can appreciate trying to get objects to be cathexed and have significance, and then be cathexed and so on. But I'm not sure quite how that was working.
Yeah, sorry. I just can I come in here with something? So just thinking about it structurally, I really became aware that when I was doing drama lessons, and the real moments that stuck out for the participants were moments, I think they were extreme moments, when there was a sort of loss of control. And that's my thinking, is how this sort of loss of control of the situation is built into creating the extreme moment. So it's always related, I think, or perhaps that's my, what I'm putting here into the mix, is perhaps it's always related to a loss of control, a loss of control of oneself or of control of the situation. I think both are possible. And I think this is built up through, I was just look back into my notes, and I always really like to use one of these quotes from Hetket, from her first article from 1967. She says, drama is human beings confronted by situations which change them because of what they must face in dealing with those challenges. So there's a situation that they are trying to deal with, and within the dealing with this situation, it just completely moves out of their control in different ways. And I think that creates the extreme. Sorry, I'll just shut up here. That's a thought that emerged, as clarified as I was listening to you talk.
Bobby, we're going to come to you later. We're just going to focus on the organizing group at the moment, yeah? And also, I want to come in with something else, hearing what David was saying, and also what, if I pronounce right, Sendor was saying. I found it quite interesting how come that those two read completely different. That one thing that she planned it, and another thing that it was also unexpected for her, which I thought was quite extreme. Because the understanding about it, I read it first time and the second time as that it was unexpected for her as well. But I kind of think that it actually makes sense if people think that she planned it. And I wonder if that's where this particular situation is extreme about, is that it's difficult to really know, isn't it? Even it come across as something unexpected, it's difficult to really know whether that you've really planned it, or you've sort of unconsciously hoped something would happen, or you were using something unconsciously as a, like in this case, the lipstick as a weapon or something. So I just want to share that in terms of understanding that what is specifically extreme in this situation. Kostas, do you want to share some of what you think? Response to it?
Okay, I don't know if I can offer much more on that, but just adding to all this, that to my point of view, it's not. I would prefer that she didn't intend it, that it was more like an unconscious reaction to the situation. I mean, for me, when I was reading it, and when I heard it today, it's brought me a lot of similar situations where people, especially women, are trying to do their best in order to survive in a manly world. And I'm not talking about only for women, of course. I mean, young people are doing the same. But it brought me some interesting real events from Greece, where, for example, a few years ago, the Minister of Culture was having sexual relationship with one of their colleagues, and he was blackmailing her for keeping her position in the Ministry of Culture, and she secretly recorded her sexual relation with him, and she was blackmailing him. And when the whole thing came up in publicity, everybody was doing, of course, how bad he behaved, things like that. Now, I think that the extreme here is that I agree with Adam and Cao Xi that probably the extreme, I mean, while you find yourself in a situation where you do not have conscious control of what you're doing. And I was thinking, on the other hand, 5 layers of meaning, how 5 layers of meaning would have worked here if we were working with young people or a group of people in a drama or something like that. I mean, why do you do that? And helping people realize what kind of powers are exercising their power over us when we find ourselves in a similar situation. We try to keep to use models we have seen around the world. My mother, I know that my mother is doing not, of course, such extreme things, but she was trying to survive in a money world, a very harsh world, when she was much younger, doing things like, pretending to be sick, or, I am sensitive, do something to take care of me, and things like that. And I saw recently, like 2 days ago, a young child who was like 8 or 9 years old, doing exactly the same thing with his family, with his parents, where they didn't want to let him play with a Padlet for many hours, and he was crying and saying, "Well, you hit me, or you harmed me," just because they dragged the Padlet out of his hands. You find yourself somewhere in a strange situation like that, where you don't have power, and you're trying to find ways to defend, maybe, or trying to take power, and you can use anything on that. And I think that what is happening in Chris's text is the interesting thing is that it can bring you similar events in your mind from your real life or something you have seen. And actually, you don't know if there was a conscious intention from the beginning or not. Of course, when the lady, the young woman, is using the lipstick from the beginning, you know that something's going to happen. There's a reason that she's using the lipstick. But I, as I said, I prefer to think that she didn't plan it consciously, that it came out of the situation. And she just used models that unconsciously structure her own self, her own thinking, and her own position in this world.
Can I add something? I just want to clarify that I also don't think that it was meant to mean that she planned it. It's just that there is the possibility of it at the very end. So the possibility, it just crops up at the very end. And I think as it has been said before, the real power of the scene is that you cannot really decide. I think. So I agree with that point entirely, that the power of the scene comes from the fact that you cannot really decide what went on, because it's a mess, as you said. It's a mess, yeah. And but it was a very interesting word that you used, Kostas. You said you preferred that version. Does that mean that so do we always prefer the so it's very strange hearing the same it's very strange hearing the phrase to prefer when we are talking about extremes. So it's a bit like, so usually what I see as extreme, that's not something that I usually prefer. I don't know if I'm just
just adding here, I mean, I find myself very often having problem with analyzing a text from the position that the characters know very well what they're doing every minute of it in it. Doing it and how conscious he is, very conscious, pre-deciding what they're going to do. I have a feeling that we don't master situations or our actions in a 100% conscious way. So there's always gaps there. How do we respond to those things. I'm more, let's say, comfortable with that. I don't know what Chris had in mind. I didn't ask him for that. But as I said, I do prefer that than anything else.
Bobby,
Yeah, I'm going to come in slightly a different angle on this, in that I didn't actually think it was that. I didn't think it was extreme, in the sense that it's very satisfying that she's turned the tables, that she's gained some power. However, in doing what she's done, there is now consequences that have a logic. He can't now let her have that phone, because it's got image of him, etc., on it, recorded. So in a sense, for me, this is the beginning of the extremity that's to come. And part of that will be an unraveling of his world, of what he's got constructed in his world, or his ideology, or the ideology around it, as it were. He in this moment has no autonomy over his life. Now, I think probably his wife's on the end of the phone, and she will. Yeah, maybe you could hear her or something like that. I don't know. I think in my logic, he would lock the door and not let her out. So then we're really starting to get into extremes. I don't know if that's useful, or if
I think
ignore it.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think it's very useful, Bobby, to me at least. And I just wanted to expand a little bit on that. And just a question. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I'm just questioning now. I was just wondering if it's the kind of, it is extreme. The situation and the actions are extreme, but I don't know if it's the kind of extremity we are looking for. I wonder if this kind of extremity doesn't have a clear, let's say, explanation why it's happening. We may come to a clear explanation to that. Whether we need an extremity that actually is very difficult to put in words and find why this thing is happening. I mean, that's my question. If this is the kind of extremity we're looking for, in this approach, which we explained from the beginning of these 5 sessions, or not. This is what I'm saying, just as a question, nothing else.
So, sorry, this is just for me, Kostas. I didn't quite understand your question. Just again, sorry.
I mean, you can see the event here and start explaining it in the way. I mean, I explained it in some way.
Yeah.
What a young woman should do in a manly world when she's trying to defend herself. This is what I thought. I don't know if the extremity we're looking for is more like we are in a kind of a gap of logic, let's say, or in a gap of ability of explaining something and putting it into words. This is what I'm saying. If this extremity needs to be more like entering in this kind of gap where you don't have a ready-made explanation of what is happening there or not. And as I said, this is just a question, just wondering aloud now. It's not a critique, it's more like a, is this what we're looking for? Or?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I can't answer your question. I mean, other than I'm very aware that just to pick up on what Bobby was saying, and why I was asking the question about what the potential for the tragic is in there. I think that relates to your question too, because for me, it's about trying to open up a gap that is logical within the context, within the situation, but actually the kind of extremity that Bobby went on to describe, for example, feels like that is dependent on us trying to stay in the situation and keep trying to open it out, rather than, which is interesting because you mentioned levels of meaning, different levels of explanation in the action. It's almost like how you try and stay in it and slow time down and expand time and space so that we can go deeper, rather than narratively or chronologically trying to develop the story in that way. And for me, that's what I'm really interested in, and what I'm trying to open up here, probably very crudely, with what I've offered. But for me, there's a connection there between what Bobby's saying and your question, because I don't think you can just, I think my understanding of the extreme is that that's there. It's present, and it is beginning slowly to offer the potential for us to really see how the irrationality and suffering of everyday life can go unnoticed. It's potentially there, but like if that door closes, if we take that decision, and we begin to improvise from that point, and he shuts the door and he tries to get the phone back, for example, then I really think that the potential for the tragic there is very powerful. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know more than that at this moment. We've got a few people.
I think Kate wants to speak. Would you like to start, Kate?
Yeah, I wanted to come back to what you said, Kostas, about the gaps and when you can't put things into words. And I think that's a really good definition of not the extreme, perhaps. Well, yes, I mean, I'm wondering whether the obscene and the extreme are the same thing. Later on, Edward kind of starts talking about, later on, kind of, I mean, years later, he starts talking about the theatre of Dionysus, which is the thing that I've picked up on. And the obscene is the space where things can't be put into words, and it just means out of sight. And I think, Chris, your scene does all the things, because the situation is unjust, it's tragic. Tragic situation makes the situation worse, and it uncovers depravity and justice. I think that scene does all of those things that you introduced at the beginning. But I'm just wondering whether it would help us to sort of shift extreme into obscene, because I think the kiss is obscene. But then all actions, all things that can't be put into words and can't be rationalized are things that can't be seen, things that can't be understood, things that can't be put into words. It's acting, really, isn't it? It's the things you do with your body that you, when words defy you. So, yeah, I just wanted to sort of bring the theatre of Dionysus into it, because tragedy was invented by them, and Edward Bond goes on about the Greeks a lot, and I think they're really relevant to what he talks about.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, could you just say a little bit more about when you say shifting to the obscene and the relationship between that and the unseen, just for my clarity?
Yeah, the skein is the wall that divides the visible part of the stage from the invisible part of the stage, and tragedy goes always, for the Greeks, goes behind the skeina. And people say, oh, it's because the Greeks were squeamish and they didn't want to look at the blood and gore, but I think it's much cleverer than that. And I think tragedy is really connected to the obscene, the things that can't be seen but can be felt and sort of experienced. but not with the eyes, and can't be put into words, as Kostas says. The sort of, once you're in the land of the gap, you're in the obscene. And the troubling thing about your scene is that, you know, immediately you go, why on earth did she do that? And it seems irrational. And it is, because it's got her into a bigger mess and therefore up to the ante for the tragedy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just want to respond to that.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean by, or at least some explanation of what you mean by aesthetic extreme that we're looking for?
I'm thinking that the extreme and the obscene might be related. And I think it might be helpful to sort of shift the discussion. Well, the concept extreme, shift it into the notion of the obscene, which just literally means it's out of sight. So you're not using your eyes. Whenever you sort of have a squeamish reaction to something, or your body sort of responds. If you see what I mean. I don't know if that.
Sorry, just one sentence on that. I think that's really interesting. I really need to think about it. I mean, there are so many moments, especially actually, if you're talking about Bond, when actually the tragic action is very visible and it is very obscene, but very much in front of our sight. But I was just wondering, in relation to this scene, that moment after the kiss, how long that is, the gap, how long that is, because the rest is the photographing, the teacher, how he reacts. That's the reaction to the extreme or obscene or whatever we call it. But actually, I think that's the question,
Yes.
how long that gap can be sort of drawn out to create space for us to ask that question, why, and what is this that Kostas is also saying, because the rest is the reaction, I think, to that, or trying to patch up things. Sorry for jumping in before the people who
Kostas, do you want to say something, or will we move on to Suron?
Are you? Is that? Did you say that to me?
No, I said it's to Kostas, because he
Sorry. It's just I lost my signal and
he was answering basically.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
you're asking me. You're asking me, Joseph.
That's something that
Sorry.
you were saying, that's the different.
I think what Kate was saying about Lacan is very, very interesting, and I think we need to look at it more carefully, maybe. I just, if I try to put my own words there, and the way I understand that, it is when you're trying to put something into words, you are haunted by an event. And you are struggling, you want to put it into new words, yeah? Then don't just come in your mind immediately, you know, and interpret things just like that, as you do in daily life. And this is what I'm asking, what kind of extreme push you in such a thing to, you know, want to put into words, but you can't find them, and you still struggle, and you still haunted by an extremity in an event. If I mean, I'm trying to put simple words on that the way I understand it. I might be wrong, of course. Sorry.
Yeah. Suron?
Thank you. I would like to respond to Kostas' discussion. He talked about the how the extreme raised. My answer is, my guess here is the extreme actually raised by two ways. First is the starting by the role. I guess her grandmother and her as one of the vulnerable group in the society, and they experienced a lot of injustice situation, and then this kind of unconscious ideas are actually already rooted in her mind. She she not used to be neglected by the society, by others in the or working place, in the hospital, and maybe by her family as well. And the extreme in the scene, I guess, is raised and developed by the what can I say? Neglected the behavior of teacher, because at the beginning he seems he want to control her at the beginning, and then his attitudes become stronger and stronger. He tried to ask her to sign the contract, and then immediately turn off her phone. So, which feels like which he stand with the system, and then the teacher's attitude represents one of the lens of the unjust society. It might be. So this scene, it might be a shifting point for her to fight back in the dilemma. That's my response to Kostas' discussion.
You're asking for, are you asking Kostas, Suro? Oh no,
No.
You're just responding.
Responding, yeah.
Okay, Sorrel, would you like to talk, Sorrel?
Yes, yeah. There's a couple of things. When I put my hand up to speak, I was going to talk about, somebody mentioned how would the 5 layers of meaning work in this instance. But I also, now kind of having listened to other people as well, I think also I'm thinking about, I think what Kostas said, how do you put these things into words? How do you enable young people who I work with to speak about and to understand and explain the extreme and the obscene moments within a moment of theatre or drama? And I find with my students, I do use the 5 layers of meaning as questions, as a way of kind of unpicking those moments. So I was wondering, if I was working on this, the kiss, if I take the kiss as the action in Dorothy's 5 layers of meaning, and I started to ask myself, is that kiss an obscene, extreme action? Is it an unjust action? Or perhaps, I don't know, as we plumb into it and unpick it, perhaps we find it is a just action. Is it the tragedy? Is it the tragic moment? So if we take the kiss as the action, and then the next layer of meaning for Dorothy is the motivation, what is the girl's motivation in kissing him? You could say at a very simple level, it's to get her phone back, because she's got to find some way of getting that phone back so she can get out of that room and get to work. It's, you know, that it's got that kind of simple, direct urgency to it for her. And the investment for her in that is her grandmother, that she needs to be in contact with her, that she needs to get to work to raise the money to support her family. She needs her autonomy as well. Is about, I think, about breaking the rules, isn't there, against the school that she's in, and fighting against that, and fighting for her own right as a young person to exist and to be able to earn money, look after her grandmother, be herself, and keep contact with her friends, of course, as well, which, you know, we've spoken about this in previous sessions, that the phone for a young person is the outside world. It can be their life, but, you know, in quite an extreme fashion. It's an extreme way. Constantly, you know, you take a phone away from a child, and it's like you've taken their life away from them. The model for her in doing that kiss is, I think, what people already started talking about, the social media, how these kind of acts can be used to gain power, to gain currency. You know, it is an extreme way of doing it, but that, you know, she's got that model, that of this kind of behavior, that, you know, it's all around us. And then you come to the most important layer for Dorothy, which is the stance. You know, why is the world like this? And there's so much here that we could talk about. You know, I think the question I was asking was, and then this links back to what Kostas was saying, was the actions that people have to take in order to survive in a you know, in the patriarchy. And I work with a lot of young women, and they're constantly talking about struggle against the patriarchy, and that they very much experience that, even in, you know, the young ages that they are. And so it is, I think, to do with, you know, maybe that, why do young women in our world have to use these kind of means to have a voice and to get what they want and to live their lives? Why does this young woman have to do that? Is that the kind of society that we are putting ourselves in, that we are developing, that's happening? I don't know. I think for young people, certainly that would be a big question that they would want to explore from that moment. And then that, for me, is a tragedy, that is the kind of actions that someone has to take in this world, maybe to feel that they could have power, they could have autonomy, they could do a very simple thing like go to work. You know, that's what she has to do, to go to work, to earn money to support her family. And that is a tragedy, and it's obscene, and it's extreme. I'm not sure I understand the difference between obscene and extreme. I need to read more about that, but I'm sure Kate could enlighten me. It is unjust, I think, that kiss, but it also, bizarrely, and the more I think about it, is quite just as well, because it's the only, maybe it's the only course of action she sees open to her in that moment. So I think it's a wonderfully complex moment when she kisses him. And I think it's rich and full of possibilities for any group of young people that will be working with that piece of text, Chris. So congratulations on that. I can see my students would really grapple with that beautifully. So yeah, I don't know that. Yes.
Sylvie,
Thank you. Sylvie, yeah.
Wondering from the beginning, was this girl really vulnerable? Because I think she might have a choice before to sign this contract. Because, for example, in Hungary, and I think in many countries, not by signing a contract, but anyway, it's forbidden to bring a phone. But a lot of students just hiding this phone, just taking out when it's not teachers around, and it's won't take much risk to sign it, and next to bring it with her. And I'm not sure that we will measure the extremity, is extreme or not the situation, just to go back on a chronological way, not solver, but back to her relationship with this teacher. Was it really conscious or unconscious, this reaction? I was thinking about Kostas' words that is socially not accepted, but it's a kind of model if someone like a young person, especially woman, vulnerable, and found them herself in a difficult situation. Maybe it's a accepted solution. How did she react? But might because she forget her phone, but she might left her phone at the room and the school room, and afterwards she went out and made her makeup and come back. And I was wondering the extremities depending on their relationship, because there was a kind of gradually stronger tension how we moved forward on the text, and I could feel that it's something happening, but it's somehow was exactly the way how might she was planning it. I am not sure that she was unconscious about this situation. The third thing is the extremity is given by the social contract, the social meaning that it's acceptable for a young woman to react like this, or it's a kind of habit now, or something like this. This gives the extremity, the measure of the extremity of it. I don't know.
Thank you. Sandor?
Thank you. I want to refer back to what Kate said about the connection between obscene and the extreme, because I was as soon as she said it, I started to think about it, because I wanted to find where that could be connected, and I think it's very interesting that, and I think that this scene also demonstrates it well, that what we if we take the word obscene, which means, as Kate said, out of sight, which literally should not happen on stage because we are too squeamish. I think that the tragedy is that there are less and less things that are obscene today, and you need to get more and more extreme to just achieve that level of obscenity so that people start to look away, because we don't look away anymore, because our level of so we are just so calloused toward violence and injustice that simply what a couple of hundred years ago was deemed as obscene, today it's just almost part of our lives. And I think this is the tragedy, and how you need to go to the extremes so that you can achieve something that someone from today's world can say that, okay, I don't want to see that. Because on social media and on the internet, basically, you would have to go to your extremes to just find something that you say, okay, I can't bear to look upon this anymore. And I think that is something really interesting to look into, because this scene and the things that it implies can really start to go into that direction, especially with social media and connection, and with the connection between people. But I think that this is where these two terms can be connected, and this is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
Sorry to jump the queue, but I don't think it is. It's not like pornography, the obscene. It's not, everything gets more and more disgustingly literal. It's just, you shut your eyes and you're in the obscene, you're in the obscene, because you're depending on your other senses. It's just whatever's not visual. And you're trying to make sense of it using your other senses. Normally, we sort of work out where we are in time and space, and we know who we are, and we know how connected we are or how separate we are from events by looking. The visuals kind of distances us and makes us safe and separate. And the minute you stop looking, you're in it, because you can't measure, the ears can't really measure distance as well as the eyes can. So the minute you enter the obscene, it's not like saying, oh, you've become sort of part of a sort of pornographic scenario or a horrible sort of violent horror film. It's just that you become physically involved because you can't separate yourself from events. Lacan calls it the real. But I just wanted to say that.
Bibi?
Let me try to share some thoughts about the text, and I hope I can make myself clear. The first thing is about the notion of extreme or extremity. Well, I've been listening to the different response to the text and how people identify the kids, the students' kids as an act of extremity. And I couldn't help but ask, if whether this is the only extreme act or extremity that we are seeing in the scene, because it might seem very explicit that what she's doing is extreme, but how about that implicit extremity in which the teacher has been enforcing the rule no matter what, without trying to understand why the student needs her phone, trying to understand what her reasons are. So it seems to me that the teacher is being extreme in that way too, by enforcing the rule no matter what. So but that's something usually untalked of, because is mild extremity. There's such a thing exists, but yeah, but it looks implicit. So, but the discussion so far has made me think about that idea. And then I also would agree with some of the discussions before, saying that it seems to me that this is the only way of survival of this student in this situation in order to get an upper hand in this power relationship. Subconsciously or consciously, she's doing that for survival. And then that situation also takes me to relate to the Me Too movement. And a lot of the discussions about sexual harassment or sexual abuse, not a lot of, but sometimes that kind of discussions get to a point where people would question where the abused were lying. Are they actually, because very often it's very hard to determine who's telling the truth and who's telling the lie, because in the Me Too situations, very often it's just two people there, and it's very hard to decide. And sometimes I do hear people commenting on cases like that by saying that, maybe that girl or maybe the abused is actually doing that to ruin somebody's reputation, or maybe he or she is lying. So I relate to those situations in response to Chris' second question about how the situation, how this text might develop into a tragedy. And I thought, what if this girl's story, this girl's, what she did eventually became a case to negate the victims of real sexual harassments, real sexual assault. Meaning, though there are real cases there, but people are using this girl's example as see, these people are lying. They're just using that as a tactic to play the game, and that become a case to argue against people who were really sexually abused. So I was thinking about a situation like that. So by acting for justice for herself, she's actually bringing about injustice in other people. So yeah, those are the thoughts I have in response to Chris's question and the text that has been presented.
Okay, sorry, I'm next in line, but I don't feel I'm reacting to what Phoebe was saying. So if anyone wants to come and react to that, Chris or anyone else, I'm happy to wait for my chance to speak.
Wait, because I wanted you to bring in the discussion that we had previously about the difference between working off the text and
Yeah, well, just coming in on that, I got a lot from this discussion, and thank you really for bringing up a lot of different points. And also I was thinking about because I'm really when I'm thinking about so what I'm trying to do in my process drama work is facilitate the participants to create in some way some sort of extreme or tragic situations in the way they are making the play. And what I was exploring, what I have been exploring, is how can I help them to give tools to do that, to build into their improvisations, because at the same time it would be great to have them being in these situations as well and creating them for themselves. But of course, with the improvisation, very often we try to solve the problem, and that goes against the logic of creating drama. So that's an interesting contradiction. And what I was thinking here was what can I use in creating that, and this discussion about the obscene and the extreme for me is really interesting, because the obscene really connects with the visual. And that's something, and action is both visual and also very it's also non-visual. Part of it is not visual, so it's very felt effective as well. So it's quite so I'm thinking about the structure between the two as well, and how can that be used in tasks given to participants. and what Bobby said about this is actually where the tragic starts is quite interesting for me, because it's actually how could this be continued and turned into a process drama work is really exciting or really interesting, and that really brings the question of where does the being, what we call being in role, begin. So when I'm reading a text, how much does that allow me to be in that situation? If I'm acting it out, does that allow me more to be in the situation or less than reading it? When I'm listening to someone else read it, does that allow me to be in it? But I think the kind of being that we are trying to explore is what Bolton and also David call making of drama. So when we are being in it, but we are also aware of ourselves making it. And for that, I think I quite like this situation and using the elements of it, taking it apart, but then trying to develop it, perhaps in a sort of improvisation mode, and exploring what could happen there, but very consciously trying to push it over the boundary of the acceptable in some way. But of course, so these are the questions, and I haven't said too much, but just thrown in a few more questions. But I think that whole making element is really important beside the being. But it actually, you know, it's really interesting for me. Where does the being and the making begin? What's the least that's needed for that to happen? Classically, we have a very strong sort of structuring mode into protecting into role. But the question is always, and not only because of time, but more because of the commitment of the participants, what's the least that is necessary for that step-by-step protection, to allow participants to be in the making mode, but not get distant from it or tired by the process itself of us trying to protect them into the role. Sorry, I think I'm chucking in a lot of questions, of a lot of my uncertainties rather than valid questions, just topics that interest me, and I'll shut up from here on. So people more clever
to have a little discussion at least about. So I'm just going to ask if Becky, if you're okay with this, because you're next in line, can we have some responses to this question? Let's stay on this area before, and then we'll move it to you. Is that okay? Do people want to respond to that? I mean, Kate raised her hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, whenever I was rehearsing with my students, you know, and they've never learnt their lines until far too close to the actual day of the performance, I used to say to them, you can't read the text and act at the same time. You're either reading or you're acting. And it's because if you've got the text in your hand, you're not in your body, you're not using your eyes as you would if you were in role. And I think this relates to what we're talking about, the real. And do you remember one of the sessions couple of sessions ago, we talked about what you see in the mind's eye when you're in role, and how you know when you're really in role in process drama, because you can see things that aren't there. And I think this is connected to the obscene. The imagination is connected to the obscene, which is linked to drama and linked to the kind of close physical proximity and sort of personal impact that tragedy has. I don't know if that helps at all, but
David or Kostas or Chris, do you want to respond to that?
No, not at this point. Other than to say, no, just one little thing. I think absolutely, you know, when you're reading, you can't experience it. If you were to develop this situation in any kind of process drama or through any kind of exercises with young people, it would all be about, for me, about embodying it, and taking, if you like, the text out of the hands. So I think moments like, for example, Adam said he's been very interested in how long that moment takes when the teacher's stunned. That moment from being stunned to the photographing him. And for me, that's a really important example of how we can really utilize the tragic to basically slow time down and begin to try and embody through experience. If they're improvising, a series of constraints that need to be introduced to enable them to do that, so they are liberated from the text, they are liberated from pieces of paper in their hands. And it seems to me that that's the difference as well between, you know, some creating an event in a process drama, being in role, and obviously theatre, because I think there's a different relationship when you're seeing it rather than reading it, when you're seeing it being done with the kind of precision and care and skill that an actor can bring through enacting it. And I think then that also brings, you know, another dimension into play through resonance, which I'm not saying it's the same as you get through being in role in metaxis, but I think I'm not quite sure for me, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure what the difference is, but I do know that an audience can meet themselves on the stage. And Bond's talked about the triple brain being activated, which is the brain of the character, or the brain of an actor playing the character, and the brain of the audience that they can meet. And I think that's the power of resonance too, that actually it begins to create an event in you, not just in what you're watching. That's all I wanted to just pick up on there.
Well, I'm just expanding on Chris's expansion between, you know, reading, watching. I would add doing. Are these different? I mean, watching a good performance, like you said, Chris, with good actors enacting a situation in a way that brings the audience on stage. Is it different with doing process drama, for example? That's a good question. I think we need to respond to that, and I'm not now, of course, but yeah, we need to think of that as well. And I think a good area to look at and research is how different is reading and watching and doing. What kind of activities happening in your minds or in your bodies, of course, when this kind of things are taking place. I'm afraid I don't have a question. I can suppose things at the moment, but I don't have definite answers to that.
Helen, did you raise your hand early on?
I did, yes. I suppose I'm a primary school teacher myself, so in our school, it's an all-girls school, but our principal is very against hugs or touches or anything that, you know, even though it's very hard to not to hug a child, but anyway. So we're very sensitized to this situation, even though it's at primary school and it wouldn't be as volatile, I suppose. But I felt when I was reading it, Chris, I felt horror in my stomach, and I was reading these alarm bells. So the first alarm bell was the door, and the next alarm bell was the table and the space between them, and the phones going off, the battles of the phones. And I was really getting uptight. And then the lipstick, and for me, it was when they originally touched. I said, that's him now. He's gone. So I think that that script is very rich, and I felt like that they were already gone to the extreme on that first kind of exchange when they were speaking to each other, because they were both at the end of their tether. He wanted this and she wanted this. So the loss of control for me was there very early on, and I could see it happening and I was feeling it. It didn't have to be embodied. You were reading it and I was getting it, and it was the extreme, and it was just full of weapons and weaponizing, and I just thought it was very strong piece of work.
Thank you. Adam, are you going to say something?
Yeah, just one. Sorry, Becky. Just one reaction to that. I'm just thinking on my feet here on the difference between process drama and theater in that sense. So if just going with this idea of the extreme being created by the loss of control, and in process drama we are allowed to explore how explore different possibilities to react, different reactions, so we can bring in the reactions to this loss of control as we are making the play. While in the theater we are watching others' reactions and observing others' reactions and finding our which is possibly spread out on a spectrum, and finding our place in relation to that. So I was just thinking, anyway, that's the thing I wanted to add.
And last questions and comments from Becky. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. I have a couple of thoughts that I wanted to share, and as different people have been talking, I keep on changing and trying to restructure the order of my thoughts, because with everything some people say, it changes. So Helen has completely flipped it for me, and so my final point has now become my first point. It is that I completely agree with you, Helen, that for me, that moment of the physical contact between the teacher and the student, that was what stood out to me. And so it occurs to me that we as practitioners bring our own contexts to this story, this script that Chris has given us today. And so that can completely affect what we take home from it, like where what our acceptance and understanding of that teacher-pupil relationship, those subtleties. And so for me, if that moment of extremity was the physical touch, then actually for me, the kiss almost became the release of the feeling of, oh, something's going to happen. Oh God, something's happened. And then, yes, I'm absolutely fascinated to explore what happens next. But then my teacher head gets in the way, because David right at the beginning asked Chris, what is the purpose of the script, and bringing that to the table today. And I think, Chris, my understanding from what you've said is that actually it was a practicality born of the fact that it's difficult to improvise in this format. But for me, actually, I always struggle to get my students to actually improvise in process drama. They're young, so they're all under 18, and often they're under 16 and vulnerable. And so they would struggle to freely improvise in a meaningful way. And so I can see the advantage of giving them a script as a scaffold, as a structure, to facilitate them in exploring to a deeper level, rather than just superficial, which is often what I get from my students. But Adam was talking about wanting to give students tools to explore tragic and extreme, and I completely agree that that is that might be something I'm aiming for. But when I'm dealing with young, vulnerable, underage students, to leave that script as the ... I would feel a reservation in terms of my duty of care to say, now go off and improvise what happens next. I think providing a script, although yes, it reduces the ability for a student to be and create and to experience, I think that distance can give them protection where it's necessary to give them a bit of protection. And although Chris, you said they can't experience, okay, but they can certainly empathize. And sometimes what you need to develop in your students is empathy. And so I would see there is a great, like using the script can be very valid, even if it's not reaching the full depth of being that you might aspire to. And so with my students, I might actually be asking them to improvise moments within the script or explore moments within the script. So there's been some discussion about, was it pre-planned? Okay, if it wasn't pre-planned, there is a point at which that decision was made. And I'm really interested to dig into that motive, that moment of decision where the student felt that this was the only thing she could do. And then my final thought, and this is, it kind of goes full circle, sorry, the patriarchy. And I'm coming to this slightly late, so I apologize if I've missed something early on. But I wonder whether we're only thinking about the patriarchy because in this instance, the student happens to be female and the teacher happens to be male. And is that even, is it actually more about balance, imbalance of power, sorry. So not necessarily about patriarchy, but that's where we always go to when that, that imbalance is gendered in that way. But for my students, they would also want to explore it being free of the gender and the patriarchy. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky, and thanks for everyone's questions and comments and ideas. I think we have enough pool of enough useful questions and areas for us to explore in the future. And because of time, I'm just going to ask Chris to share some final words, and then we can just wrap this up.
Right. Okay. I'm not really sure what to say after listening to that. I just one thing. I just wanted to say that when I was talking about experience and reading, I was responding directly to what Kate said because of my experience of working with actors is the same. It's not just with students that, you know, once you've got that text in your hand and you're trying to experience you know, a dramatic moment, it's such a crippling thing. I think it's different from sitting and reading it as an exercise or using elements of text to read. I totally agree with Helen. I think you can get quite visceral responses just from what you read. I know I do anyway. I was referring specifically to that process of Kate was referring to rehearsal, but I suspect it would be the same if you were trying to structure an improvisation for young people. That's what I meant to say. I didn't make it very clearly. Well, I feel well out of my depth, really. I don't know what to say much. I mean, I actually realized that I don't really know what the meaning of obscene is for the last 58 years. So I need to go and check that one. And I wanted to just try and pull a few thoughts together, and it'll come out as it comes out, because I started very much from wanting to create a situation based on what had come before in order to really push that contradiction that I think is always built into the tragic. And the more extreme the situation becomes, it is revealed through tragedy. And I suppose I'm saying I wanted to make, not that I think I necessarily need to here, but for me, I think that all contemporary drama needs to be dealing with the tragic or the tragicomic anyway. I agree with Adam. I found myself chuckling and sighing sadly as it was developing for me, as I was just creating it. And I think it's because of the nature of the tragic itself. So, you know, when Bond is talking about the situation being unjust, I think what's really useful in what Sorrel was saying is it is both just and unjust in that moment. And the power of that goes right to why I think the tragic is so important in drama today, because it takes us straight to the political. And what I mean by that is that the imagination is, you know, it's the source of self-knowledge and the human in all of us. And because it's a specific form of human consciousness, it's also a form of reality. But I'm beginning to realize from these series of seminars how much it's also a process of the unconscious too. And I think I'm now beginning to think about the connection between the real, the Lacanian real, I should say, and the unconscious too, and how important that is, because for me, the politics of tragedy, which was the first real form of politics, I think, in ancient Greece at that time, is that it relates to self-government. And what I mean by that is trying to create drama where we can take responsibility for the situation that has been enacted before us in order to test our values. And it creates a kind of a unity between the social and the political that's held in the personal, or held in the tragic figure that Bond was referring to, who speaks and then defines an age. So for me, its power is it's kind of like the way it allows us to apply a brake, slow time down. And that's because it's ultimately dialectical, which is the relationship not only between justice but injustice, and how people have all talked about how they responded very much from their own experience, how recognizing your own life in it is how it can become an event in you. And this seems to me to be absolutely critical. I think probably it's a kind of a dialectical mode of experience that we're talking about here, and it's one of reversal, and it's negated, it's one of negation. And what it does is situations like the one that we've just begun to explore today, I believe, implicates us at every step. And I think this is extremely useful if we can find ways of opening it up for young people, because tragedy's the opposite for me to the kind of vapid forms of hopeful idealism that we often present for young people, which actually for me doesn't prepare them for the reality of the world that they live in. And I think it offers actually a bracing, a skepticism that heavily qualifies what we think of as hope. And I think it deepens us towards finding a form of courage to address all of these questions that have come up tonight. And for me, that's extremely powerful. And it has to be situated at every point in the work that we do. So I was going back in my thoughts to this notion of, and I think it's really useful. The first thing is the loss of control from this discussion, how, as Adam referred to that Heathcote quote, of how having to deal with the situation changes us, but how the more extreme our situation is, the more profound that change can be when we experience a loss of control in a situation that we could all recognize. And that's, I think that's the relationship between the mundane and the tragic. And I think I'm often mindful of the power of objects in that, because the objects so often embody the banal, and it's through the banality often that you can cathex those objects, try and find ways of making the phone work in this instance, and the pen. I will defend the pen if I had some time to work with it, in order to reanimate a dialectical relationship between understanding, which is seeing, and conceptualizing, which is about revaluing what it is we're seeing. And that's why I think it's really important that people can see both the injustice of the teacher's actions alongside the injustice of what the girl does in an attempt to be free, or in an attempt to break out of the confines that she finds herself placed in. And that power of the unexpected to really open up a gap is all that I was really working for. And in that sense, it's a very intuitive thing. I've been very interested in the conversation about what we prefer. And I think I prefer that she did it, if you like, she didn't plan to do it too. But at the same time, I'm also very now interested in the fact that when I wrote it, I didn't know, but intuitively, bodily, it just came out. And the role of intuition in that process is extremely important. I'm talking about having an artistic experience of trying to create something. And the minute I wrote it, so she said to me, well, why does she do it? And I said, I don't know. I really don't know. But there was something very powerfully resonant in it for me. And I was also thinking now about, well, unconsciously, I don't know what's at work. Never mind consciously what's at work, but what is at work here unconsciously? And this notion then of how we could stay in a moment and really try to find its logic, how it creates a gap in our in us as well as in the situation is the nature of the dialectic that I'm talking about, where we are constantly experiencing an interpenetration of opposites, which sometimes is as much felt and intuitive and imaginative as it is in any way logical. It's not something that you can put into words at all. And I still can't quite yet understand exactly what's at work there, but I know that if I was working on using this text as the basis for a lesson, that I would need to answer those questions, because I would need to answer my own question of why, and find that situation. So for me, this discussion's raised all kinds of things I wasn't expecting. I don't understand, I don't grasp, completely new, but I found that it's brought about some very interesting connections between the use of control, unexpected turns, contradiction, negation, the obscene in relation to the extreme, the role of the intuitive, what's embodied, what's the relationship between seeing and not seeing, and how, for me, that really does provide, if you like, the scaffolding of what I understand the tragic to be, and why children, appropriately and protected in the right way, need to engage with it, because I do believe that if drama is about exploring what it means to be human, then in the context of the social world that we're in, we have to find that kind of courage that I think it gives us, rather than empty hope. So that's all I can say, really.
Well, thank you, Chris. I think that's a very useful way to end this 5 sessions for the 5 of us, but also for those who's been sticking with us. I think, you know, hearing this past 2 hours, you hear a lot of the world out there, a lot of the things in our minds, a lot of concerns about the world. And I think, you know, when we talk enough about drama and all the specific aspects in drama, all of these things needs to go into young people's mind, and they're living real worlds. And so when we end with our 5 sessions, We hope that this is not the end of us thinking and making and doing and providing opportunity for young people to really meet that world, to meet themselves. And on behalf of the group, I thank Insight Drama, who organizes the event, and thanks for Kostas, Chris, Adam, and David, who keeps pushing us and challenging us. And there are a lot of things that we talk a lot about supposing things tonight. A lot of things that we all said that it's unclear, we don't know. But I think when we began this process, none of us was looking for something that we all know and that we're all certain. We're all exploring this. So thank you for joining us in this journey. As I said, this won't be the end of it. We are finding ways to keep organizing events like this and finding different way to really connecting with you all. So sincerely thank everybody who's here tonight, and we wish to see you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just also thank all of you, especially those who've been taking part in creating these events on behalf of Insight. If you know, even I mean, I wanted to say, if you allow us, but anyway, we'll be sending you information about how we will proceed. There is the Padlet, which I've put the link of into the chat. So feel free to keep putting comments there, we hope to keep in touch before we meet again. Hopefully, we'll meet soon and keep our discussions going. Thank you very much, Cao Xi, for sharing today, and thank you very much, Chris, for your contribution. It's been really stimulating for me. And thanks all of you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.